So, have you ever noticed that the very thing we try the absolute hardest to push away in ourselves always seems to find a way back into our lives? It's kind of wild, right? It's this strange, completely universal paradox of human nature. We push a feeling down, we lock it away in a box, and yet those repressed traits always seem to bubble back up to the surface, usually right when we least expect them to. Just picture these two totally opposite scenarios for a second. On one hand, you've got someone who absolutely prides themselves on being strictly, unshakably rational. Nothing phases them. But then out of nowhere, they are just completely overwhelmed by this tidal wave of unexpected emotion. Or think about the ultimate control seeker, you know the type, someone whose entire life is micromanaged down to the minute. Eventually, they get hit with this undeniable, overwhelming urge to just drop everything and let go. I want you to really think about that for a second. Have you ever seen this happen to a friend, maybe a coworker, or let's be honest, maybe even yourself? Why exactly does this happen?
Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into the ancient, kind of dense, but absolutely fascinating concept that explains this exact psychological phenomenon. We're talking about Enantiodromia, which is the psychological movement toward wholeness. Now, I know it is a massive mouthful of a word, but the mechanics behind it, they are literally one of the most powerful keys you can find for understanding human behavior.
Okay, so let's break this down. Enantiodromia literally translates to running counter. What it actually describes is the movement of something toward its opposite, specifically when our consciousness becomes way too one-sided. The absolutely crucial thing to understand here is that this isn't just you changing your mind or being in a weird mood for a day. No, this is a much deeper shift. It's basically a foundational law of nature, a law of the human psyche, and, as we're going to see a bit later, it's even a law of human civilization itself. It's like a rubber band. When we pull too far in one direction, the universe just naturally snaps us back.
To really wrap our heads around this, we actually need to do a little time travel. This concept goes way, way back to the 6th century BCE with the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. He had this idea that reality wasn't just some static thing. He saw it as a continuous flowing transformation between interconnected opposites. Day turns into night, hot becomes cold, you get the idea. Now fast forward a couple millennia to the 20th century, and the legendary Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung takes this ancient intuition about continuous tension and applies it directly to how our conscious and unconscious minds actually work.
So Jung introduces this really brilliant idea about human selectivity. Basically, he realized that we simply cannot consciously be everything all at once. It's impossible. We'd short circuit. So what do? We pick and choose. We select specific values, specific attitudes, and certain identities to help us navigate our lives. But, and this is a massive but, what we exclude doesn't just evaporate. All those rejected qualities don't just vanish into thin air. Instead, they get pushed right down into the basement of our minds, the unconscious. Think about the massive divide we end up creating inside ourselves. If your conscious identity is built around being super strong and independent, your unconscious shadow is suddenly stockpiling all your vulnerability and dependence. If you are strictly rational up top, your shadow is holding on to all that messy imagination and emotion. The crazy thing is, the more completely we shut these opposites out of our daily conscious lives, the more psychological energy just builds and builds in that shadow. It acts like a pressure cooker, creating a really dangerous, wobbly one-sidedness. Let's make this super concrete. Imagine a person whose entire operating system is built on one core belief: I must always be strong. Early on, that is a fantastic survival tool. It makes them resilient, disciplined, a real go-getter. But over time, as they lean entirely on this one single trait, it turns into a total trap. They stop letting themselves be vulnerable, they categorically refuse to ask for help or admit they're scared. Their entire identity gets totally wrapped up in playing the strong one 24/7. And you know what happens next? When that conscious identity gets too rigid, too one-sided, boom, enantiodromia kicks in. The psyche basically demands integration, and that unconscious opposite comes crashing through the front door. This sudden snap, it usually looks like severe anxiety, total emotional exhaustion, or sometimes a sudden, really intense dependence on someone else. All of that neglected vulnerability just violently bursts right out of the shadow. So let's look at part 1, reframing the shadow as hidden potential, not the enemy. Look, whenever we hear the word shadow, we immediately picture darkness, villains, or something evil. But that is actually a huge misunderstanding of what Jung was getting at.
There is tremendous potential hidden in there. Because the shadow is really just a storage unit for the neglected parts of ourselves, it actually holds enormous psychological wealth. For instance, an emotionally detached person who finally opens up that shadow might uncover incredibly deep compassion. A naturally passive person who always suppresses their anger might finally tap into their true hidden assertiveness. It's not about destroying yourself, it's about reclaiming your missing pieces. This built-in drive toward wholeness really explains so much of our everyday behavior. Think about the hyper-successful corporate type. They spend decades chasing more money, more status, optimizing every second of their day. And then one random Tuesday, they hit a total wall and ask, wait, what about meaning? Why am I even doing all this? That is their neglected inner life finally grabbing the steering wheel and demanding some attention. But here's where this gets truly fascinating. This doesn't just happen to individual people.
Which brings us to part 2, the cultural shift and enantiodromia in modern society. This exact same invisible force shapes entire human civilizations when they get totally obsessed with operating in just one single way. Yeah, society has a shadow too. Think about the modern world. We are so skewed toward knowing. We have unbelievable science, tech, we measure everything, and we manipulate the external world like never before. But look at the flip side, being. As a culture, we are getting incredibly uncertain about meaning, deep relationships, beauty, and wisdom. We absolutely know how to build the world, but we're kind of forgetting how to actually live in it.
As this quote perfectly sums up, when knowing becomes dominant and being is neglected, the neglected dimension eventually returns. This is exactly why we're seeing this massive global explosion in things like mindfulness, meditation retreats, and digital detoxes. It's not just some random fad. It's our collective societal shadows standing up and demanding balance. We are literally watching cultural enantiodromia happen right in front of our eyes.
So what do we do about it?
Part 3, the path forward, moving from opposition to integration.
So, how do we actually navigate all this tension? Well, the goal is definitely not to destroy the shadow. And on a societal level, the goal isn't to just throw science in the trash and run away into the woods. The goal is to bring the two sides together with open eyes. The journey usually follows these 5 steps. First, we identify completely with one side. Second, we repress its opposite. Third, confrontation. This is when the opposite rears its head, creating anxiety or a midlife crisis. But then, step 4, awareness. We pause and recognize the conflict. And finally, step 5, integration. That initial friction beautifully transforms into a unified whole. We don't just flip to being our opposite. We become more complete.
A mature mind, and honestly, a mature society, learns the magic word here, which is and. It learns to hold both sides together. It's reason and emotion. It's science and spirituality, individuality and community, material prosperity and meaning. The trick is that we don't just swing violently back and forth like a pendulum. We expand our capacity to embrace both of these complementary forces at the exact same time.
So if you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer today, please let it be this. The opposite is not your enemy. It's a message. When sudden, unexplainable anger bubbles up, it might just be your psyche asking you what boundary got crossed. When a heavy sadness hits, it's asking you what you lost. When a highly illogical culture suddenly craves spirituality, it's asking what parts of the human soul got left behind. These uncomfortable feelings, they're simply your mind knocking on the door, asking for a seat at the table.
The whole journey of life is really just a movement from opposition toward wholeness. So I want to leave you with a thought, a little homework, if you will. Stop fighting your inner paradoxes. Lean in and listen to them. Take a hard look at the parts of yourself that you've boxed up, pushed down, or ignored for years, and ask yourself right now, what is your shadow actually asking you?